What's up, hobby friends? My name is Casey and this is eBay Miniature Rescues. Today we're going to take a look at some really special models from Warhammer Age of Sigmar. These are Khorne Blood Warriors, or at least they will be. When I made that video about the worst Warhammer army I'd ever seen, this is exactly what I was talking about. Not just a paint job, but an actual mess. These Blood Warriors are fantastic models that came out right at the beginning of Age of Sigmar, shipped in the starter sets and later turned into multi-part kits. When I started playing Warhammer again, these were my absolute go-to models. Really dynamic, unlike any of the other models I'd seen in Warhammer before, and they have some really fun rules that make playing them on the table a great time. The auction that I got these from said that the 10 Blood Warriors were from the multi-part kit. They did come with the banner, but I'm pretty sure at least 2 of these models are actually from the starter set. The updated rules for these guys can be found in their newest book and on the Age of Sigmar app, and they still look really fun to play. This set of 10 Blood Warriors are in some serious need of repair. As you can see, they are absolutely caked in paint. My best guess is that someone was in the middle of stripping these and decided to move on to something more fun. And I get it, sometimes it's just much easier to paint the new model that doesn't need all that much work. But of course, these models ended up back on eBay and on my table. The end result though is very thick and tough to remove paint. Let's give them a bath in an ultrasonic cleaner filled with LA's Totally Awesome. In my experience, this has been the absolute best way to remove paint without the danger of damaging anything on the models. Once the cleaning process is complete, I can really get a good look at these models to assess the damage. Unfortunately, it doesn't look great for these minis. So here's the deal, and here's where I'm at. I've picked 5 out of the 10 that were in this batch because I think the last person that owned these actually used some kind of thinner to try and strip the paint originally. So essentially, there are parts of some of these plastic pieces that have actually melted away. That's not something that I like to try and cover up. If this was Nurgle, it wouldn't be a problem so much, but you know, these are Khorne models. So right now I'm trying to do my best to paint in some of those details to try and get that definition back, but it's not looking great for some of these guys. So instead of having a 10-man squad, we're gonna knock it down to 5, and I'll replace the rest with more bloodletters. And this can just be kind of an example of if you want to add more into this army of the mortal units, then this will just kind of be this color scheme that goes with the rest of the whole army. So I'm going to keep going on these and see where we end up. Well, I'm really disappointed. I mean, I paid next to nothing for these guys, and I was expecting some casualties, but having half of these models pretty much gone means that I'm gonna have to make a shift in order to finish this army. As luck would have it, I happened to pick up 20 more Bloodletters and a Bloodstoker to go with all of the rest of them. And that was in order to fill out the points in this army. And that brings it up to pretty much exactly, well, it does exactly 2,000 points of Khorne Demons. So overall, not a bad trade for 5 Blood Warriors. Next up, I'm going to clean the models using an acetone knife and try and get them to a place where I can at least make something halfway decent out of them. I still want to include these in the army, more for the fun than anything. So let's dive back in and see what we can do. I fixed some of the poses and got rid of some of the melted plastic. Then proceeded to pin and glue the models to the bases. After that, it was time for priming and picking out some colors. Alright, seeing as these models are in a state, we'll call it, let's just try and have some fun. I'm going to set these up for a good filter color. Using white ink over the top of black gives us a whole bunch of gradients. It shows us where the light is coming from and allows us to put a very transparent color over the top of that to color the whole model and preserve those gradients. This is a great way to get your models looking really cool in a very short amount of time and save you the trouble of painting in the light. This is my go-to for getting a lot of models onto the tabletop really quickly. It's not perfect, but it's fun and pretty easy. Next up, I'm going to take a look at some Blood Warrior artwork and decide what parts are going to be what color. It's good practice to look at the models finished so you know where all the little details are, especially when they're painted really well. It serves as a really good guide and not just for color. In particular, I think red is the best option for these models. They are Blood Warriors, so it would be weird to not have them with red armor. That gives us the option to change other things. The helmets, the leathers, and the trim. Contrast paints are secretly amazing through an airbrush. They are, for the most part, already thinned and ready to go. So I picked a red and I went for it, making sure to cover the entire model evenly. For the trim, I'm going to go for a bright copper. I mixed 2 drops of Vallejo metal color aluminum to 4 drops of copper, so a 1:2 ratio. This makes a really nice bright copper color. The trim on these models is absolutely everywhere, but this is the part where we really get to see how those gradients of red turned out. The copper frames everything nicely, and I'm really happy with how a majority of the red turned out. There are some nice shadows throughout each model, and they aren't entirely black. The red contrast paint, even over black, still shows up just enough to give us some pretty natural looking shadows. Definitely keep contrast paints in mind when you go to use your airbrush. They can be extremely useful. For the other metallics, I went with a dark metal. That way I can come back in with a brighter metal and do some edge highlighting later on. For the most part, these models are shaping up. You can see some problem areas here and there, but they are certainly playable models, and that makes me really happy. The other models that I set aside were half painted before I decided to put them down, and they'll probably go into my personal Khorne army at some point. but I don't think I could ever bring myself to sell them the way they are, which is too bad because the world needs more blood warriors. The leather parts, I chose a dark brown and mixed in some gray to highlight. Nothing too fancy because I'm going to be covering them up with brown pigment powder to fit them into the bases and into the rest of the army. So I'm not too worried about overdoing the highlights for this. Finally, to really bring everything together and get even more contrast on these models, I'm going to mix up an oil wash. I'm going to mix together some Winsor Newton Black and some odorless mineral spirits, and that's going to get our wash. You want the wash to be runny, but still pretty dark. If it's too thin, then the oil paint breaks up and looks kind of grainy. So if there's too much white spirit, then add a little more paint and vice versa. Adding the oils really brings out the details and sharpens the whole model. This is by far my favorite part of the process. You really get to see each piece of the model in all of its glory. Once the wash has begun to dry, I'll go back with a clean brush and wipe away any excess from the panels, bringing back that red color. For the most part, the oil washes do settle neatly into the recesses and pretty much gives us our final product. I really enjoy these models. When I came back into the hobby, it was shortly after the launch of Age of Sigmar, so not that long. These models in particular were standouts for me, not just from the way that they looked, but the way they played. Really fun rules and really cool looking models. I'm very happy that I was able to bring at least 5 of these models into this khorne army, and it brings us one step closer to finally being done with that entire project. A few more minor things and it's gonna be done, and I can't wait. If you are new to this channel, then thanks for stopping by and checking it out. Please consider subscribing to see the rest of this army and for future rescues. Thank you for joining me on another miniature rescue. Once again, I'm Casey, and I will see you in the next video. Just realized that the next video is that tattoo.